popcorn ready. It's game time, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome
a team that is known as Stoppers. Stoppers.
The Athletic presents Hoge Jahns.
Every single play, go take it. Bring that juice. Let's go get it. Come on.
Chicago's best Bears coverage.
Go Bears.
Go Bears.
From NBC Sports Chicago, it's Adam Hoge.
I do think he has the support of his teammates. Why would you not be rooting for him to succeed?
And from The Athletic, it's Adam Jahns.
I don't mean to psychoanalyze this stuff, but this is what we do in Chicago. This is what we do with their quarterbacks, and this is the biggest story in town.
Here they are, the Adams, Hoge Jahns.
What's up? Welcome in. Day 2 of the NFL draft is over, and the Bears did it again. This is what they do, right, John? They got to get their guys, and it's fine as long as it works. I don't know if they made our lives easier or harder tonight. Originally I was like, yes, the Bears are making a pick in 5 minutes, and this thing's all going to be over. But Teven Jenkins is now a Chicago Bear.
And then here we are at 11:19 p.m.
Running on fumes, man. I'm telling you. I'm not even playing around. I got an old-fashioned here. And
good for you.
Let's do this thing. Maker's Old Fashioned. It is way too late. I'm running on 2 hours of sleep, and you know what though? I still love it. It's NFL draft weekend, and the adrenaline is going.
I may have had a glass of red wine or two. I'm not going to say, but it is 11:20 p.m.
Before the Pace press conference. See, I at least waited till the press conference. No, I made it before the press conference.
Yes.
I'm not gonna lie.
During. But the Bears drafted everybody's guy. Like,
yeah,
everybody's
that
I know in Chicago, at least at one point in time in some mock draft, had Teven Jenkins going to the Chicago Bears. I had him going in 2 mock drafts to the Bears. So we're all right on this one. We got the pick wrong. Nobody had 39, right? 39, right?
As long as you get the guy.
As long as you get the guy. They got their guy. They got their guy.
Yeah.
So they should be happy about that.
Yeah, not a surprise to hear Pace say that a first-round grade on him. You kind of know that based on the move they made.
Yeah. I'm guessing it wasn't like Dan Weeder of the Tribune asked if he was in the cloud of 20, and I'm guessing he wasn't in the cloud of 20. Maybe like a late first-round grade is what I'm thinking.
Because he said he didn't want to answer that, which I don't know why it matters after the point he was already drafted, right? So I feel like if he really was in that cloud at 20, he would have said he was. But you're probably right. Yeah, they probably viewed him like a late first-round pick. But he did very clearly say he was the number 1 guy on their board at that point, which I would hope so, considering they moved up to go get him. But that press conference was awesome. I'm talking about the one with Teven Jenkins. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be good or not, but he was. I think he could have played a football game tonight. I think he could have put pads on and run people over tonight if there was a game.
First off, did you see his reaction video?
I have not seen that.
So the Bears shared it. You have to check it out. He doesn't move. Okay. You know, like you see these reaction videos, and you got the guy with the, everybody's holding their phones up. All the guys got their phones up. There's group hugs, all that stuff going on. He didn't move. He just sat in his lazy boy and just sat there. I'm sure there was hugs. He said he's hugged his dad right after that. But in the reaction video from the Chicago Bears, he's just sitting there, which is good. I feel like that fits his personality. He's ready to go. Now
that's kind of what Justin Fields did.
Yeah.
Like Justin stood up, but he didn't really have much of a reaction. Even my wife last night was like, was he even happy he was picked by the Bears? But maybe they're just like, I think they're just drafting stone cold killers.
Yeah.
And they're just straight face. Like,
well, in Jenkins' case, absolutely. The stuff he says, like we swear on this podcast, but like I'm not going to go to certain points that he goes.
Well, we wanted to swear. He's like, I got words I can't really say here.
Yeah, but I love that. I love that. The Bears love that too. They need that toughness, that edge, that aggression, that nastiness on their offensive line, and Fields almost fits on this too because he's got that toughness. But when you have an offensive line, like a leader like this on your offensive line who's going to be a mauler, like you love that. The Bears need that. I don't think they've really had that since Kyle Long and before that, Olin Kreutz. They need this.
There was a little Olin in him, especially after I spent last night with Olin at the studio. And I thought he was going to come at me a couple times, like is usually the case. I put this in my column on Teven Jenkins tonight. Us sleepy reporters, I was ready to run through the Zoom screen. I mean, I was ready to go. He just had this, and I'll give you a couple examples. We don't have the audio for you as we're kind of, again, doing this on the fly on draft weekend. Maybe we'll have some of it as we recap the whole thing later in the weekend or early next week. But, he said, what's your number one priority? It's to keep the quarterback upright. And I love what he said. If
I don't care if I hold, punch, grab, all that stuff.
Doesn't matter. Don't let the quarterback get hit. And he said if the quarterback gets hit late, that's my problem. That's not his problem. That's my problem. So he takes it personally, and that's the kind of mindset. And then he also said he's gonna make sure these teams that passed on him rue the day. Rue the day is what he used. So. I don't know.
That's an extremely underrated word that you don't hear a lot.
Yeah.
Rue.
I'm not sure I had seen that in a transcription before until tonight, but there it was.
You know who has that mindset too is Justin Fields. Like I feel like you talk about their emotions on draft here, or you mentioned earlier. There's almost an anger there that Justin Fields was the 4th overall pick. There's almost an anger there from Teven Jenkins that he lasted until the 2nd round and the 39th pick. And I don't know if the Bears need guys with, those chips on their shoulder, but can't hurt.
No, two guys that seem extremely serious about what they do. And in Justin Fields' case, I don't know enough about Teven Jenkins or people that have been around Teven Jenkins, but in Fields' case, because he's a Big Ten guy, we're going to have some of this for you in this podcast. Because I got a chance to talk to Pat Fitzgerald, the Northwestern head coach, today. Honestly, I felt a little bit bad. I had to apologize to Fitz because here Northwestern is, and they, for the first time in program history, have 2 guys go in the first round. And here I am, I'm calling them up, and I'm like, hey, can we talk about Justin Fields? Who lit you up in Evanston a couple of years ago and beat you again in the Big Ten championship game. But there's a reason, and part of it is actually, Fitz and Matt Nagy have become close since Nagy came here. And it didn't surprise me to hear Fitz talk about, you'll hear this a little bit later in the podcast, that the Bears, you saw those photos of Pace and Nagy at the pro day at Northwestern. Well, part of their conversation was about the Northwestern prospects and Greg Newsome and Rashawn Slater, but part of it too was also about Justin Fields, because it's not just that Northwestern's played against Justin Fields, but Fitz actually has a relationship with Fields going back to when he recruited him. Northwestern was, believe it or not, the first school that offered Justin Fields. And I love Fitz's honesty because he's like, and then everybody else watched the same tape that we did, and we moved to the back of the line. And then there was Georgia and Ohio State and all those programs. And anyway, there's some good stuff in there. So we'll play that a little bit later on in the podcast. The point being is just it's hard to find a coach that doesn't love Justin Fields. I mean, it really is. I mean, maybe the Georgia coaches, because he transferred out of there, maybe you can get somebody to say a bad thing about him there. But even there, they played him. We talked a little bit about last night about how he couldn't beat out Jake Fromm, and that was probably a little unfair because I think it was kind of a unique circumstance, and they were still getting him into games. I think he played 12 games because he was so talented. How could you not? And then he goes to Ohio State, 40 touchdowns and 1 interception in his first 13 starts.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a good ratio.
Yeah, and I just remember that game, it was a Friday night game in Evanston, and the dude was just unreal. He really was. And that's where we've had this conversation on the podcast, Johns, over the last couple of months and talking about Fields. As ugly as some of that Big Ten championship game was, and by the way, Fitz has a defense for Fields that you'll hear for that game in December. Doesn't the game in Evanston matter more, or just as much at least, in the grand scheme of things, as he's going up and down the field, throwing for 4 touchdowns, doing incredible things? I had to go back and watch some of this tape, Johns, and it's just something I think I need to point out. Whatever holes we want to poke into Justin Fields, and it reminds me a little bit about Deshaun Watson. And I was guilty of this with Deshaun, too. I had a similar grade on him, middle first round. But I had him behind Mitch Trubisky and Patrick Mahomes. When you go back and watch his college, the guy's special. Like, at the end of the day, just trust what your eyes are saying or seeing.
Seeing, there you go.
Yeah, your eyes don't
And
talk.
listen to what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yes.
whatever.
There we go.
There's going to be more of this. There's going to be more of this, too, by the way, before we're out of here.
Take a sip of your bourbon, and for me with Fields, it was that Northwestern game, like the Big Ten championship. Like, I soured on him a bit. Like, oh, this guy's going to be the number 1 overall pick. Like, he looks awful. But then he plays against Clemson.
Yeah.
Gets lit up in the middle of the field, right? Lit up. You know, I didn't mind the hit, but he got lit up, right? And the way he played against Clemson, and hearing him today and how much he wanted that shot at Clemson, and Trevor Lawrence again, didn't mention Trevor Lawrence, but Clemson. And then he threw, 6 touchdowns in that game, right? Like, it's just
6 touchdowns, and I think it's 395 yards or 375 yards.
Yeah. And watch some of those throws.
Oh, they're insane.
Oh, they're not easy. Some of those touchdown grabs, they're not easy. And beyond the touchdowns.
And he was in pain.
Yes. And you could see him coming off the field in pain. Yes.
Yeah.
That, like, going back to that game. Like,
Ryan Day told us today he couldn't get out of bed after that game.
Yeah. It's that toughness that Ryan Pace covets, too. You know, it's, can I, like, on a side note of this, like, hearing all the things that Ryan Pace was saying about Justin Fields' toughness, I just kept thinking about Mitch Trubisky missing games, right? Like, I think Trubisky played tough. I think he played injured. Maybe certain players handle it better than others, but I don't know why. It's probably unfair in a sense, but I thought about that, and I'm just throwing it out there for others to think about. But, you know, maybe others handle that type of adversity better. We saw Justin Fields do it against Clemson. Again, that helped me get over, when I was looking at him, helped me get over that Northwestern game, which he wasn't very good in.
Yeah, and you know, I went back to something Nate Tice said on this podcast last week when we talked to him. And because he loved Justin Fields. He had Justin Fields. He was like, Justin Fields is 1B. And in any other year, he's the number 1 overall pick. That's how much he loved him. And he said, as we were talking about some of these other quarterbacks, he's like, you shouldn't be squinting. Like, you shouldn't be squinting to see what you want to see. It shouldn't be that hard. And I guess what I'm saying is, you go back and watch Fields and the good moments. I mean, again, but it's almost the opposite. You're almost squinting to come up with the flaws, is what I'm saying. Like, and I brought it up in a question with Ryan Day today, because if we're going to be honest, Tice may have even said this to us too. I can't remember. Or maybe it was Matt Bowen. But one of them mentioned about the scheme of that offense. It's very vertical. Yeah. Like, they're taking shots that it's very touchdown to check down.
Those are his reads and progressions.
So if your first read is downfield, you need to take some time.
Yeah.
You need time. And so if you're gonna, then you're gonna see a quarterback who's methodical a little bit. Now, I still think he needs to speed that up. I think that's one of the things he's got to work on. But I guess my overall point is just, you don't have to squint to see something special. The big difference to me in this evaluation with Fields and watching what he did at Ohio State and between with what Trubisky did at North Carolina, and I'll be honest, I still don't think I was squinting, but there is a big difference in that it was all projection. Yeah. It was all, you saw it, you saw some accuracy, you actually did. You saw some incredible throws. You saw him move around with his feet and do these things. But you were still projecting in a way because he wasn't playing at Ohio State. He wasn't playing against Clemson and throwing 6 touchdowns. It was a lot of mediocre results and not a lot of winning, whereas Justin Fields comes with all the victories.
9-2 against ranked teams over 2 seasons. Mitch Trubisky was 2-3 in his 1 year. And now I still think that the Big Ten's a level up over the ACC, in my personal opinion, at least the high-end teams, right? And to see Justin Fields perform in some of those marquee games, right? To see him against Clemson in the national semifinal. Like, that should stick with you. Again, I said this on the podcast last night. Like, that should stick with you. One of my takeaways, and I put this in my takeaways column, which you can find on The Athletic, is off your question to Ryan Day today about that relationship with Matt Nagy. And he said that Matt Nagy started asking about Justin Fields in 2019.
Yeah, right when he transferred.
2019.
Yeah.
It's like that's when the conversation started. That's when he's on Matt Nagy's radar. And then you see him become a Heisman Trophy finalist. To have that stat, that ridiculous stat that you had, 41 touchdown passes and 1 interception?
Can I just bring up one thing, though, about that timing? So, Justin Fields transferred to Ohio State the same week the Bears played the Eagles in the playoffs. And that was like when you're actually feeling good about Mitch.
Yeah.
As ugly as of a game that was, and at the end, it was Mitch who led you down the field.
Yeah.
And gave you a touchdown and put you in position to kick the field goal. And yet, I couldn't help but think about that today. I'm like, and still you had Matt Nagy reaching out to Ryan Day about Justin Fields.
Yeah. Well, then you had the 2019 season unfold. Another injury for Trubisky. The benching. I still believe it was a benching in L.A. All sorts of questions about where Trubisky's at.
You're
turning
all
off
over
the team.
Yeah,
I was. Yeah.
But by the way, Ryan Pace was in Evanston for that game I was talking about.
Yeah.
Ryan Pace was in the press box that day for that Northwestern Ohio State game.
So I just found that unique or extremely notable that Ryan Day said that, and just in terms of the groundwork that went into this that started a couple years ago. And maybe they're still hoping that Trubisky pans out at that point, but the work and the conversations that Matt Nagy brought to this evaluation, like we knew it was going to be different than 2017 just because of Matt Nagy's input. Like John Fox wasn't going to be locked out of the room anymore. Like that wasn't going to happen. Like Matt Nagy, like it's in his room now. Like this is his quarterback. And just to hear Ryan Day say that, like that just tells you, it should tell you how different this was.
So quickly on that topic of what happened in 2017, do you get those vibes with what the 49ers did with Trey Lance?
Yes. Yeah, I do.
I mean, some of these quotes that were coming out today that were like, I mean, Lance had that similar reaction as Trubisky where he's like, I didn't know they were going to pick me. Like, I didn't know until it was happening. And then they weren't telling other coaches what was going on. They weren't telling their scouts what was going on. Like, it was this very secretive operation.
I think there was the report from Adam Schefter, who's close with like everybody at the 49ers, I believe, that the scouts favored Trey Lance and Kyle Shanahan wanted Mac Jones. You know,
I'm just saying there's a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of similarities there.
Yeah. But to use your word projection, like Trey Lance is a projection.
Yeah.
The dude threw fewer passes in college than Mitch Trubisky and at a lower level. And the same applies to Zach Wilson, too, in my opinion. I know you like them a lot, but there's still a lot of projection there, at least in terms of opponent. Primetime games. You see, you have a more concrete evaluation with the Justin Fields.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to the fact that I still want to repeat. I love them all. But yeah, I'm already kind of feeling like, I might regret the whole Wilson Lance. I was really neck and neck with Lance and Fields. I struggled with that for pretty much 3 days. I kept going back and watching more and more. And at the end of the day, it was almost more of like a gut feeling.
Yeah.
Which I think sometimes that happens. I think sometimes these guys are, even in the draft rooms, it's so neck and neck that you got to separate them somewhere.
Speaking of draft rooms, we got to play Fitz in a second. But you wanted to do this podcast late, and so I'm watching the draft. And did you see the Eagles draft rooms? Howie Roseman's going around and giving fist bumps to everybody, and then he gives one to this last guy. I can't recognize who he is, but that last guy's pissed.
Oh, was he?
And Howie Roseman puts his arms out like, what's going on? And that guy puts his arms out like, what's going on? There was some disagreement. That room did not look like there was a consensus on whatever player that was picked. Make sure if you're listening to search for that on Twitter. It's quite funny.
That's funny. I got to check that out. That was like last year when Bill O'Brien was sitting at his desk and he didn't, I mean, you couldn't hear the audio, but he was live on TV and he's on the phone and he like slams the phone and he starts yelling and he's like MFing somebody. And it's like, what just happened in Houston? Oh, and then he got fired a few months later.
Yeah. Houston took a quarterback with their first pick this year.
Davis Mills. My guy Kellen Mond is in Minnesota.
How about that?
With your guy Kirk Cousins. Who's going to win that battle? We should have a podcast bet on that. And by the way, I would bet everything.
Hold on. Why is Monty your guy? I feel like I put him in a mock draft before you.
Yeah, but I stole him from you and put him in the first round.
That's true.
You didn't have the balls to do that.
No. With good reason.
Yeah, probably. What did he go in the third?
Yeah, like the second pick of the third or something like that.
That's interesting though. He ended up in Minnesota. But I can think of what's Kirk Cousins' contract? $38 million, $40 million, whatever ridiculous overpay.
It's all guaranteed, and it's all guaranteed.
Yeah, so that's a guarantee that he's still going to be the quarterback this year.
Yeah, you took a swing on a developmental guy.
I like it.
You want to play Fitz?
Real quick before we do that, can we just very quickly talk about just the vibe and how suddenly it has changed?
Oh yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
I think
it goes back to the vibe you said about how it feels different, like just in terms of the projection of the pick, the quarterback. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm just talking about this is, and I've said this. I think I've said this before on this podcast. Like it's been a tough offseason, even for us. There's been so much negativity, and I've talked to my wife about this. Like it's hard to write, tweet, say anything, and every single response is negative. And I get it. You know, the Bears bungled the end of the season, and they bungled the press conferences. They did not handle it well, and it just left and then they signed Andy Dalton. Everybody's upset. I mean, I get it. But what a 180 in the last 24 hours. It's I'm trying to think, Johns. I can't think of anything among any of the professional teams in Chicago where there's been such a sudden shift that quickly. And the Jay Cutler trade comes to mind in terms of excitement level. But things weren't that bad before the Cutler trade. I mean, people were upset that the Bears had kind of had 2 500 seasons and the defense was slipping a little bit and this and that, but it wasn't complete like panic. You can't do anything right with any move. And then all of a sudden, bam, bam, 2 draft picks. The whole fan base is excited again.
I put out a poll at 2 hours ago, and there are now 4,300 votes on it. And it was just grade the Bears draft so far. A, B, C, and I'm in shock. I think a lot of people missed the I'm in shock, that grade, if you want to call it a grade. But the leader by far is A with 76%. Now there's some wet blankets out there, you know, with the C at 1.9%, probably guys that love draft capital. I love draft capital. I get it. Like I thought Ryan Pace was going to trade back today. Like you can mock me on Twitter on that if you want. Like I thought that was absolutely going to happen because history says it has happened twice, 3 times if you count 2016 twice, because of the 2 trade backs. But to get a guy with a first round grade, you know, and then start a run on tackles, I think that's notable too. Like you get Fields and you feel the jubilation, right? And then you get the guy that like almost everybody wanted to begin with, like that offensive tackle that you've never drafted, like since Gabe Carimi.
Yeah,
you get him in the second round, and then he comes on and he talks about how much of a badass he is, but that's genuine because he plays like a badass, and he said that for the past couple of years. Like, yeah, that puts you over the edge if you're a Bears fan, I think. It does. Yeah, I get they have needs at cornerback. They got needs at wide receiver. You know, the 5th round's been a good round for Ryan Pace. We'll see what he could do this year. But, you know, with you're getting 2 guys. Like, Fields isn't going to play right away, but Teven Jenkins is going to start week 1. Right tackle. Sorry, Jermaine Ifedi. Like, the Bears' new starting right tackle was drafted today on Friday night.
However, I will say it was notable that Ryan Pace did not commit to him playing left or right. A lot of times when he drafts these linemen, he says, well, we view him as a guard, or we view him as a center, or that's where we're going to start him. I mean, that's pretty... that he's done that a lot with some of these offensive linemen he's drafted, and tonight he was asked multiple times, and it was like, well, he could play both. He could play left and right tackle, and he could also play guard. Like, they didn't want to... I thought that was a message sort of to both tackles that better come ready to play.
Well, Fetty should just be happy to be here. Let's be honest. It's if there's a message here,
$5 million. Though.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly like he had like a bunch of suitors lining up to sign him at free agency. It's just a 1-year deal. The Charles Leno message, like I think that Charles Leno message started with the pursuit of Trent Williams. At least the conversations about Trent Williams in the offseason. Now they couldn't keep up with that type of money, but that's a clear sign to me that they're looking for upgrades. And if I know a lot of pundits think Teven Jenkins is specifically a right tackle. Ryan Pace gets paid a lot more money to make these decisions, so we'll see. But yeah, there is something noteworthy about him saying that he can handle either side of the offensive line.
Yeah, just something to keep in mind. It'll be interesting to see how those practice reps are distributed if and when they get on the practice field in the offseason. But I mean, there's just another example. If you're Charles Leno, you really don't want to show up to the offseason program? When you saw what happened today? I'd probably want to show up. And maybe he's there. We don't know who's there or not. But although we heard that Tariq Cohen's in there, but he's probably rehabbing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a few of those guys in there.
All right. Let's hear from Pat Fitzgerald, Northwestern's head coach. Very excited. He was in Cleveland last night with Rashawn Slater. But as you're going to hear, he also had his eye on what was happening with the Bears and Justin Fields.
His hometown Bears.
That's right. So here he is, Pat Fitzgerald. All right, Pat. So you were in Cleveland last night with Rashawn Slater. You get 2 of your players drafted in the first round. First time that's ever happened in Northwestern history. First of all, congratulations, and any great stories last night being in Cleveland with Rashawn.
Well, thanks, Adam. It's great to be on with you. So proud of these 2 young men, special guys from amazing families that have worked their tails off and have earned this. It was a little bit surreal after the draft, after Rashawn got picked. I was hopeful that Greg would get picked pretty quickly. I had to catch a flight, and then I was trying to get with our video staff that was coming back with me, and sure enough, the driver couldn't get us to the airport that I could have walked in 5 minutes, and it took us 40 minutes to get there. So no issues with Rashawn, but I got to see a lot of side streets in downtown Cleveland, so that was fun.
Oh, that's always good. Hey, I know you've kind of been asked this a lot in the last couple of weeks leading up to this draft, but this kind of, I've been close to the program, so I've seen it happening. But what does this say about how the program's coming along? You get the facilities. It's sort of it doesn't happen overnight, right? But you're starting to see guys and other people, I guess, around the country realize, oh, wait a minute, Northwestern has some legitimate talent now.
No question. Well, let's just start with where we're at. I mean, to win 4 straight bowl championships and 2 out of the last 3 Big Ten West titles. I know we haven't gotten over that mountaintop yet, but we're going to, and it's because of amazing support and generosity from some amazing families like the Ryans and the Wilsons and the Walter. The list goes on, and the Hutchinson. I mean, there's so many names that I could list of support, and then obviously the support from the university. But we've got very talented players, incredibly talented players, first-round talent. And, what it says about where we're going, you can have it all here at Northwestern. You get a top 10 education, play at a championship, top 10 level football program, have everything you need to get developed for life in the 4 or 5 years that you're here, and now say that, you can be developed to be a first-rounder. And what else more do you want? I mean, you've been around our guys, the brotherhood that we have. A lot of people sell it. We don't have to sell it. We just show you. And you just feel fortunate and blessed to be in my role. And I'm so thankful for the families like the Slaters and the Newsoms and all of our guys. It's we're in a great place, but I couldn't be more excited about the future and where we're going.
Pat, it's my mind kept going back. I know it's a game you don't want to relive, but my mind kept going back to the Ohio State game 2 years ago in 2019. The scoreboard was not pretty, but just all the talent that was on the field that night. And I think, you watch that game and probably everyone's like, oh, well, the score in Ohio State, this and that. But I mean, all these guys Slater, Newsome, Chase Young was out there for Ohio State. Justin Fields is now a Bear, and my mind just keeps going back to that game and just how much talent was there on a Friday night in Evanston in a big game.
Well, that's Big Ten football.
Yeah.
And to say that, Northwestern now is part of that conversation, I think talks to you about where our program is compared to where it was. And, I had a lot of guys reach out to me here in the last 2 weeks, that played in the 60s and 70s and 80s and early 90s. And, as long as I'm the head coach, we'll never forget those guys that went through a lot of challenges and difficult times. And, I don't want to speak for Greg and Rashawn, and our other 9 guys that are going to hopefully get their names called or get into a camp this weekend. But, we wouldn't be here without those men too. And we're just thankful for what they fought through, but we're in a completely different place than we've ever been in program history. And I could not be more excited about the future. And I'm so stoked for those 2 guys. A seminal moment last night, getting 2 in the first round. It doesn't happen without relentless work ethic and 2 very talented players.
Well, it's also well documented that you're a Bears fan, and you have a relationship with Justin Fields that goes back to when you recruited him. As a fan, how excited were you to see the Bears get their quarterback last night?
Well, I think we needed one, right? There was no question about that. I mean, it was well documented that, we needed one. And you just, as a fan sitting there with Rashawn and his parents and his family, with Kurt Anderson, our great O-line coach, Kurt and I were talking on the way over about, all right, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the quarterbacks because, Kurt's from Glenview, I'm from Orland. I mean, there's no more diehard Bear fans and the 2 of us, McGargle, the guys on our staff that are Chicagoans. And, we just sat, I'm like, it's going to be really interesting. Let's see what happens. And when, it kind of went 1, 2, 3, it was like, all right, are we going to stand pat and wait for Mac? But you got the Patriots there that need a quarterback too, and then sure enough, there came the trade, and we went, all right, they're taking Justin. So, excited for Justin and, excited to see what he can do for the Bears and help us win those close games this year because, my friendship with Matt Nagy, I'm fired up for him to get his quarterback and really excited for him and Ryan and the whole organization.
So I was wondering about that because, you are close with Nags, and we all know the detail that goes into the scouting of these players and especially the quarterbacks. And they talk to all coaches. Do they talk to you as just an opposing coach that recruited the kid? Is that a conversation you guys had at any point?
Definitely had a conversation with Ryan and Matt when they were at our pro day, about not only Justin, but some other guys in the Big Ten. Absolutely. Okay. I mean, we do the same thing in recruiting. I mean, if we're going to recruit a kid from Sandburg, we're going to talk to Rob Zavonar at Lincoln Way East and, the guys all at HL. We're going to talk to everybody they play, just to try to get a 360 because there's different opinions and they're not all weighted the same. But I will tell you that there were a number of NFL head coaches and GMs that reached out to me about Justin Fields this year. And not surprised that, that he went to the Bears. There were a couple other teams I thought might jump up to take him, but I think the Bears, did what they had to do to go get the quarterback they wanted.
Well, I think everyone got to see your defense at the Big Ten championship game. You didn't get the win, but the defense really did a good job against Justin. I'm sure you would like to stop the run a little bit better in the second half. But when you get asked about that game, what do you say? Because the numbers weren't great, and even some of the tape wasn't great for Justin, but also the circumstances of the game. And I'll be honest, Fitz, I did not know until you said it on the radio earlier this week that Justin Fields was dealing with an injury in that game. I had no idea. And honestly, I like hearing that because you never heard that come out as an excuse from his side of it. No. You had to hear it months later from an opposing coach. I love that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the painful, obvious thing for us on why they fully committed to the run. And we didn't do things the way we're capable of, and it starts and ends with us as coaches. But, he got dinged up early in the game, hurt his hand. We thought he was hurt on the play over our discussion on the headphones. And then, as we came out in the second half, we're like, obviously something's not right. But, I think he gets a bad rap for that game. maybe because of yards and all that stuff. But I think we got a pretty salty defense too, and I thought we played really well in the back half in that game. And then, you couple that with the way that he responded against Clemson, I think speaks to, really who Justin Fields is and what a response he had in that game. And I texted him last night on my way to the airport after the draft, just congratulations, welcome to Chicago. And, I just couldn't be happier for the young man and for his family.
There was a story relayed on the NFL Network today that apparently Nagy last night, after they drafted him, asked him if he could recall whatever they went over on their Zoom call, whatever play they drew up, and apparently he knew it right away off the top of his head. Does that surprise you?
Not at all. No, not at all. And no, I mean, it's, like I said, sometimes just the opportunity is exactly what it should be. And it just seems to me that, the quarterback opportunity here in Chicago for Justin is exactly what he should be.
Well, it'll be a fun story to watch. And again, congrats on your guys going in the first round. And it's not over. Like you said, there's a lot of Northwestern guys that could still have their name called at some point this weekend or as priority free agents when it's all said and done on Saturday. Yeah. So it says a lot about all the talent that you guys had this year.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. We got 9 more guys. Hopefully they have their names called this weekend. And, if it's not called, they're definitely all going to get an opportunity as priority free agents because they're great players and great men. But what a great night last night. Again, best of luck to you and your family. It's great to always speak with you and enjoy the draft. Enjoy the Kentucky Derby. What a great sports weekend here back in America this weekend. Thanks, buddy. Go Cats.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. So hopefully you got something out of that connection with Justin Fields, Pat Fitzgerald. It goes back to when he recruited him. And, it was for me, Johns, when we were obviously he's prepping to play the game against Ohio State. I'm prepping to cover it as the sideline reporter. But that week leading up to the game, he's asked a lot about Fields. And some of the stuff he said, he said when he was recruiting him, he calls him a 3-play guy, which means you watch 3 plays of his high school tape and said, yeah, he could play for us. Like, that's all it took. And he knew that they were going to offer him. And then there's the fact that they kept that relationship up. I mean, Fitz, as you heard in that interview, texted Justin Fields last night. I mean, they have a relationship, and he's one of, I'm sure, many, 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 many people that the Bears consulted on this. But as you hear too, like, you trust certain voices and people you talk to more than others. You trust their opinions because you know if they're BSing you or not. And I think that Ryan Day, we've heard, is very close with Nagy, and Pat Fitzgerald is too. By the way, Fitz and Ryan Day get along too. I can tell you that. So, I mean, this coaching fraternity, a lot of it matters. And it's sometimes you hear, like, Bill Belichick hypes up every opponent he faces every single week. And it's sort of like, okay, well, who do you really like and who do you not like? But in this case, it's very, very genuine. And so I hope Bears fans that heard Fitz talking about Fields the way he does takes that to heart because it is real.
And it was relayed to the Bears again.
Yeah.
Like, that matters because of these relationships, especially like this year. Again, I feel like we've talked about this on the podcast. This year, because of the pandemic affected seasons, those relationships mattered more than ever. You needed to get information without actually going into these buildings. You needed to have these phone calls. Like, Matt Nagy's calling Ryan Day all the time, apparently. Like, they're probably text buddies. There's probably some group text.
That's a cool story, by the way.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to figure out last night, like, what's the relationship here? And the only thing I could figure out was that Ryan Day played at New Hampshire under Chip Kelly, by the way. Chip Kelly was his OC, and it was the same time that Nagy was playing at Delaware.
They played each other.
And then I believe John DeFilippo was at James Madison at the same time. So, crazy small world, and apparently, like, just that's led to a friendship that that was in the late 90s. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, then I think people forget that Ryan Day was a quarterback's coach in the league for several years. Eagles, yeah, because
he ended up on Chip Kelly's staff.
Yeah. So
and followed him to San Francisco.
So obviously, there's opportunities to have beers and hang out together. whether it's, especially the combine, Senior Bowl, all that stuff. So
yeah.
That's good bar talk. Like we played each other in college and all that stuff. Like that's great bar talk. That's great chemistry building. It's those relationships, man. It was immensely valuable this year to the Bears. It's another sign of how different this was for them in terms of the quarterback evaluations. But of course they got to turn the Fitz here. Like the relationship between Northwestern and the Bears. Like I know you talk it up, but I don't think people realize how tight those, we'll call them organizations, whatever you want, like how tight they actually are in terms of that relationship.
Yeah, I think it's helped a lot too since Nagy got there. But yeah, even at a lower level, like the scouts and the people at Northwestern, and I'm talking about all schools too, that the way that they, I'll give you an example. I mean, Cody Shada was the director of football operations at Northwestern. He just got hired by the Chargers for a similar job over there on that staff. Who did the Chargers select last night? Rashawn Slater.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a real like this is how football works, and maybe almost to a fault.
Do you think Brandon Staley got to know him here in Chicago? I don't know.
Probably,
maybe,
probably. So, and now Jay Rogers is over there on that staff too. So it's all a big web. It's all a big web, and that's why we love the combine so much, right? Because the whole web comes into one place.
Because that's when we could jump in that web.
In a Marriott bar, and I'm drinking this, and
there you go.
And we missed the combine this year. We just do. And I hope it comes back next year. I think we all need it. All right. Loving draft weekend, not loving the lack of sleep, but we're fighting our way through it. And please check out all of our content because there's a lot of it. It's a lot of hard work, and we do appreciate you guys listening, reading, and supporting us. And I should have mentioned this off the top. We got new T-shirts out. Soldier Fields,
QB1. It's not Andy Dalton anymore. Well, it is kind of.
No, it's it's the QB that wears number 1.
Yes, there you go.
That is Justin Fields. So a couple new shirts up on obviousshirts.com. Please go check that out in our collection, and you can find them there. You're going to want to take a look. They're also on our Twitter feed if you want to look at them, Instagram. It's all there for you. Please read me, NBCSportsChicago.com. Got a story up on some of that stuff you heard from Fitz. Column up on Teven Jenkins. Jahns has his observations up on The Athletic and tons more. What else you got?
Well, we got a lot more coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
We got a story in Kevin Jenkins. No, Teven Jenkins. Ooh, that's going to be tricky later. Kevin and Teven. I foresee some problems. But, yeah, search for that Saturday morning. It's almost Saturday morning anyway.
It's almost Saturday morning right now. It is in 7 minutes. Last night I went to bed at 4:45 in the morning.
That's not going to bed.
The birds were literally chirping outside the window, and I'm
what
like,
are you doing?
This is bad.
What are you doing, man?
I don't know. We're good though. All right, we should probably go get to bed right now. Thank you for listening. Check out our voicemail line is open. Bob Dabrowski's knocking it down. He's trying to get in there. I can't. We're gonna play the voicemails. I promise you, we'll play them early next week.
We just can't have it all, Bob. Everybody, call.
No, but everybody does want to hear Bob's thoughts, so it's there. I don't have them. Here's the number. I don't have it memorized. 872-221-0046. 872-221-0046. Give us your opinions on Justin Fields. Quite frankly, we screwed that up. We should have put it out there last night. No question about it. But there's still time to chime in with your thoughts on what the Bears have done. All of a sudden, it's going to be very positive, and that's very welcomed by us at this point. So thanks for listening. We will talk to you, I don't know, tomorrow, the day after. We're still got plenty more draft coverage coming. It's coming. Talk to you then. See ya.
Y'all stay corona free, all right? And God bless.